special meeting of the Newport City Council called for Wednesday, April 30th, beginning at 6 p.m. is beginning now at 6 p.m. We have present Councilmember Carter Finnegan, Councilmember Andrew Touchette, Councilmember John Manette, Council President Kevin Charbonneau, City Clerk and Treasurer James Johnson, and in the room we have Tom Bernier from the staff from Department of Public Works, and we have numerous members of our two special task forces in the room who I will not call out by name, but they're here as well. So I think we are ready to begin. Except our high-tech treasurer is going to have to mute his phone before we can go on. Okay, folks, we've got a full agenda, full conversation tonight. So I'll ask first if there are any additions or deletions to the agenda. President Charbonneau?
No, thank you.
Councilmember Manette?
No, thanks.
Mr. Touchette?
No, thank you.
Councilmember Finnegan? Mr. Johnson?
No, I really would like something.
Thank you. Okay. And I have nothing to add or delete either. Third item on the agenda is the consent agenda. This includes the regular meeting minutes from the 21st of April, an AP warrant for the 24th of April, no PR warrants, no payroll warrants in this packet, and one vendor permit from OCREP. And barring any, I'll just ask first if there are any questions or concerns about anything in the consent agenda. I'll ask the council members first.
No.
None? Anybody among the community residents? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I have a motion from President Charbonneau. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, I have a second from John. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Hearing none, the motion carries. The consent agenda is passed. And I'm going to sign that set of minutes for you right now, John. Where did it go? There it is. Do I have to sign this? Sign. Never mind.
Go ahead. I didn't leave your spot?
Nope, that's all right.
It's okay.
I made my own
It
spot.
works.
Thank you very much. Okay, consent agenda is passed. Bulk of our conversation tonight is going to revolve around the work of the two special task forces, one on water and sewer and a second on financial reporting and fiscal practices. I've said it before, I know I will say it again. These folks have done remarkable work over the last nearly 6 weeks, about 5.5 weeks, I think, at this point. And I'm deeply grateful. And several of us here have been sitting in on all of those meetings, and I think all of us can attest to how hard they worked to make this happen on this very tight timeline. So our first set of recommendations comes from the Water and Sewer Task Force. And just to set the stage, I want to remind folks of what the task was that we put before the Water and Sewer Task Force. They were asked to prioritize helping the council with recommendations about how rates should be set in order to assure that we do not have deficit spending in fiscal year 25-26. And the reason the timeline is so tight is because in order for the new rates to go into effect this summer, first billing for which would be in September, the decision has to be made by May 1st, tomorrow. So that task force worked hard, and they were deep in the numbers to make this happen. In the end, we decided that we really need to start tonight with a discussion about the budget itself, because there was no formal action earlier in the year to approve the budget. It was never put before the council to actually approve the water and sewer budget. It's the task force's recommendation, and I certainly concur that it's within our purview as water commissioners on the council to approve that or disapprove that budget. So the first item of business tonight will be to look at the budget itself. The second item of business will be to have an extended conversation, I expect, on the rates and how the task force got there. And then we'll vote on those rates. And then there are a series of recommendations that have been published that the task force members are willing to review with you all, none of which I think need action tonight. It's really just to put us all on notice about what comes next. Okay? So that's the Water and Sewer Task Force. And I'm thinking, I've got Carl and Paul and Jennifer all here. And what I'd really like to do, I think, if it's okay with the three of you, is I'll slide around the corner and have the three of you pull some chairs up to the table here and just ask not to, well, let's try and keep our backs away, trying to not turn our backs to anybody in the community residence area, and to keep our voices up as we speak with one another, but just come join us up here. What's that? Oh, that's right. And Patrick Hurley is online tonight and present as well. So, Jennifer, you want to come take this one?
I'd love to.
Great.
I decided to bring my computer.
I think the sinking chair's over there, so you win.
Yeah, it looks like Kenny's.
We could bring you the sinking chair if you want. You looked so good in it the other night.
Thank you, yeah.
Okay, I think that works. So we've got Patrick online. Patrick, you're there, right?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, great. So, Paul, I'm not sure. Are you the one leading out, Jennifer, or is Paul to try and walk us through the budget part first?
Yeah, Paul.
Me?
Yeah, you.
We're very organized.
So, what we did on the budget part, I don't know if you guys have colored versions or not, but what we did was, first thing we tried to do was figure out what was a salary-based line item and what was a regular line item. So you will see, and the reason we needed to dig into that is because there's a line item called truck and equipment repairs, but it's actually labor. So we went through, we highlighted all of that stuff. We formatted this budget so you could see only the expected actuals of the previous years, not the actuals plus what was budgeted, to sort of give a better historical presence. And then there is another highlight where we added, where we made changes. So the first thing we did, water meters were in the sewer budget.
We're on line 49.
Yes, on line 49, water meters were in the sewer budget. We zeroed that out, and that was a $25,000 line item. And we moved that to line 208 into the water budget. So the water, that essentially equaled the net zero because there was 25 in each, so it's now just 50 in water. So that the water meters were more represented properly as part of the water system and part of the water rate. So we did that. And then the other thing we did on line
176 is the Vector.
yes, 176. We ended up removing the Vector. We removed it out of water and sewer. But to start building a capital reserve fund, we added a 5% funding to the capital reserve fund. Doesn't total what was in the budget for Vector, but at least it starts the building process.
Can I jump in there for a second, Paul, just to make sure that people who aren't in these conversations with us every day understand what we're talking about? So when Paul references the Vector, this is the infamous Vector truck that we've now been talking about for several months. And it's the area where Tom Bernier had been trying to salt money away for a number of years so that our 2012 truck, when it really has outlived its useful life over sometime in the next few years, this is a very large ticket item. It can cost, what do you figure, 600,000 plus, right, Tom? The goal was to have most of the money in hand when that moment arrived. But the only money currently in the Vector truck sinking fund is 160,000, I think, which we'll talk about next month. We're not going to get to that tonight. And we had planned in next year's budget initially, Tom had budgeted again to try and pull some capital expense line out of the water and sewer budget both next year to put toward that purchase. So I just want to be clear that what Paul's saying is that we've removed those savings lines because we're trying to save while we're also trying to pay our regular bills, which we really, there's no reason to do that. However, there's also, John, I'm going to ask you to explain how the 15% rule works with capital expenditure. Can you do that?
Okay, right. The state law governing water and sewer accounts for municipalities and our current water and sewer ordinances both allow the addition to the budget of a capital reserve item which is equal to 15% of essentially the operating expenses and variable expenses. The formula is a little more complicated than that, but essentially whatever the actual expenses for the year are, you can take up to 15% of that figure and add it to the budget to build a capital reserve for future capital needs, whether it's failed pumping stations or infrastructure in the sewer plant or equipment necessary to keep the system going. But that's a permissible addition. And so we need to start building that fund up again, but we felt that 15% was too much this year. So we're starting with 5%.
And that 5% is $82,000 this year?
On sewer, and then 50 on, 50 something on water.
52 or so.
Yeah.
54,781 or 54,782.71 on water.
Now, you'll also see on the budget for the proposed for 25-26, there is not an expected sewer revenue or water revenue. That is on the report that our proposal that you're given. When you look at the breakdown of the rates, you'll see the comparison of the anticipated revenues and as they are compared to the proposed expenses. One thing that we found is in the spreadsheet that was being used, there was no actual rate and income calculations. So more Jennifer than any of us has developed a couple hundred spreadsheets to try to come up with an actual revenue calculation based on the current rate structure as it is. And a lot of this stuff in our proposal, you'll see, dub this phase 1, a temporary stopgap. Phase 2, we have a lot of stuff we would like to look into. So that's the quick breakdown of the budget. Just moved the water meters, got rid of the vac truck, added 5% to go into capital reserve, and then, in the future, the council could decide how that capital, if we're able to build, that capital reserve money could get broken up and used.
Did we also end up addressing the water tower, service for the water tower?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I forgot about that one.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, so there hadn't been anything put in for payment of the, yeah, that was a big one. I don't know how I missed that.
Because you always do.
It's true. So there was nothing put in the proposed budget that we received for paying back the beginning of the payback of the new water tower. So best estimate, that is going to add about $195,000 to this proposed budget. So that definitely brought up what we originally received was a $900 and something thousand budget. The water budget is now up to 1.15. And a large portion of that is because of that water tower, which I think Tom's last estimate was July-ish, it would be online. So, and that's when everything starts ticking.
Okay, those are all the things I think were the big items. Any questions first from the council, and then we'll ask community residents to pipe in?
I just want to say, I appreciate the structure of this, how it has all the actuals, like right away when I was looking, I was like, this is the kind of budget that I really appreciate, having that historical context. And I know how much work this was, so thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Andrew?
I just want to echo Carter. Thank you guys for putting this together and the work that you put into it. I don't have any questions currently with it, but I'm sure as I dig into it deeper, I may as well.
Yeah, the intent here is really that this is essentially a stopgap to deal with the immediate problem, and part of our phase 2 recommendation, a significant part of our phase 2 recommendation, is really looking at the structure of the whole budget in terms of whether there's a better, clearer way to present it. I mean, we obviously have a pretty good idea, at least based on these numbers, of what it costs to actually run the systems, but the question is whether there's a better way to organize it, to make it clear.
Kevin, anything you want to ask or add at the moment?
No, it's phenomenal work, I mean, in the amount of time.
So let's push it out to the community residents, and I happen to know that Ann's got some questions already, and she's been doing kind of an eagle eye approach to this. So Ann, I think it'd be helpful for you to raise up these questions, and I'll say that I'll tell you all the same thing I told Ann earlier, and that I think the council already knows, which is that whatever we pass tonight, we're going to be coming back and doing a very careful look at both the structure and the content of the budget over the next month to 2 months. So unless we find something so glaringly apparent that it's got to be addressed, my assumption is that for the most part, in a $2.8 million budget, there's going to be some give and take in all directions, and tonight's just enough to get us to the rates that we have to set. But Ann, I think it'd be helpful to actually have you name some of the questions you found already so we can note them.
Yeah, I wish I found them a little earlier, but I just happened to be looking at Social Security and Medicare today and seeing how it correlated. So if you look at line 109 of the sewer budget, and Social Security and Medicare are FICA, you'll notice that the actuals for the last, I don't know, four years were, somewhere between 14,000 and 17,000. The budget for 24-25 was up to 24,000. And then the proposed amount is only 5,000. Well, FICA doesn't change. It's always 0.765 of whatever the salaries are. So I thought, how did that happen? And I realized that the way the FICA was calculated all along, if you look backwards, under sewer collection, there's a section for Social Security, so that's great, so that's not included. But if you look down to sewer plant, you look at all the pay-related things, there's no FICA or Social Security in there. So all of those pays, the overtime, the regular pay, the vacation, holiday, and probably the sick time too, you add all of that up, and you add up also all of the pays in sewer administration, which also doesn't have any FICA or Social Security listed. Probably that amounts to about $270,000, $270,000, 0765 of that would be probably around 22,000. So that FICA that's in there at line 109 used to be for both sewer administration and for sewer plant. And so the FICA that's sitting there shouldn't be 5,000, it should be 17,000. And so when we go through line by line, and that's something that Paul suggested originally, that if we put all the things that where they do belong, you know, put the FICA for, certainly, if put the FICA for the sewer plant in with the sewer plant, and put the FICA for sewer administration in sewer administration, then it would be clear to you what you were taking .0765 of. So there are 17,000 more to be found, but I know all the calculations have been made now, and any adjustments can be made in phase 2. And the second thing I'd like to know is what other pay is. Other pay under sewer plant, I have a guess.
Can you give us the line, please, Ann?
Line 63.
Thank you.
So, you know, everywhere else, pretty much you have regular pay, overtime pay, vacation, holiday, sick, but other pay. A little unusual, and it started out at being 8,000, went to 11, 15, and then we're up now to, once it popped up to 33,000, and we're up to a proposed 30. And I wonder whether or not that's the contract for the fellow who came in and supervised in a certain way the sewer plant when we didn't have somebody who might not have had the right number of stars after his name. But we got the guy now with the right number of stars after his name, so we may not need that 30,000. When I asked Tom just recently, he said he'd really have to go back and look and see about that. But we should, that's one other thing that we should look at seriously when we do the deep dive. And I'm sure there's many others, but those were two that just came to the top.
Thank you. Other questions, concerns? Lori and then Jennifer.
Just clarifying to make sure that I understand. So on page 1, on line 18, 19, so when it says truck and equipment repairs and maintenance and cleaning, that's just the labor, correct?
Right.
And then we can find the other parts of the maintenance in its own sections. But when we see those things lumped in with the other pay, it is specifically labor, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Jennifer?
I've got two questions. One is for Mr. Manette. I haven't read the water sewer statutes recently. When you establish the 5% or whatever it is, you guys have chosen 5%, but up to 15% capital reserve fund. Is it a dedicated fund? I mean, do you have to identify what it is that the money is going to, or is it kind of a slush fund that you can dip into for whatever comes down the road?
Well, it's not a slush fund. It's specifically for capital.
Right.
And our viewpoint on the committee, as I understand it, is that it needs to actually go into a separate account and be set aside so that it can be tracked. But according to the city attorney the other night, we do not have to designate it in advance for, say, Vector truck versus a blown out pump in the sewer plant versus, you know, as long as it's dedicated to sewer issues generally or water issues generally, we can accrue it, and then when a problem comes up that qualifies, we can dedicate it. You know, our immediate concern is just to start building it back up because
I get that.
because of unanticipated, you know, you can't predict how long all of those things are going to last in all circumstances. You know, neither of these services are ones where we can say, well, we lost a pump in the plant, we're going to shut off water every other Tuesday afternoon. You know, that doesn't work.
And so what I'm hearing is that even though the statute doesn't require it to be dedicated, that your recommendation is going to be to try to set that up as a dedicated fund. So when the Vector
If I
truck...
can speak to that. So there's a little bit more work to be done on
Yeah.
that. my understanding, based on a conversation with our attorney, is that the council can move to approve a budget that includes that capital expense. There may need to be some kind of a check-in with voters in order to actually establish the dedicated fund itself. And we're still trying to investigate exactly what that would look like. So the action tonight, there's some question about whether such a dedicated fund already exists.
Yeah.
Maybe it does, so we're looking into that. There's some question about whether or not we have to go and get the approval to create the dedicated fund. And if so, we would put that on some kind of a special election ballot that we're likely to need anyway in the next few months. So we would come back to it at that point and include it among a number of other things that we'll do to address the saving question. But in the meantime, the assurance that we've gotten is that there's no reason we can't act as a council to go ahead and set the budget and assume that we're going to begin doing that saving.
So what I'm hearing is that if you do the percentage capital reserve fund, the attorney has advised that there's no voter approval needed. Is that correct?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay, then I'm
If
misunderstanding.
I understand it correctly, we don't know the answer to the question about whether or not we have to establish
Okay.
a special fund
All right.
and exactly what the mechanism is to do so. So tonight, the action of passing this budget would say it's the council's intention to build the budget to include that 5%, if that's the final amount we settle on as we pass the budget. And then we will need to work with the attorneys to figure out the best way to go about doing so.
Okay.
Yeah, because one of the underlying questions we have, not having had time in the last 6 weeks to go back through the last umpteen years worth of annual and special city meetings, is there may already in fact be funds in place. The only thing I've come across is starting from the other end, which is that in 1923, when the water ordinance was passed in that era, it actually established a capital fund. But it was built into the ordinance and it was approved by the council. I don't know, because I haven't gotten that far, whether the voters approved it as well. But at least at that time, the council clearly approved it because it was built right into the ordinance.
Right. I mean, the statute, as of July, gave authority to the water commissioners to set aside up to the 15%. So it's statutory authority. I'd be surprised if you need voter approval, to be honest.
You may be right.
You know, and I know it's an unanswered question that's being researched.
It's one we don't need to answer tonight.
Right.
Right.
And then I had one second question,
Go ahead.
real quick. So back, I believe it was 2021, the council voted to levy a $9.86 flat fee on everyone's water and sewer bills to pay for the water tower. So as you guys move forward, that vote probably is outdated, I would imagine, and may need to be revoked. And I think I sent an email out to
You did.
somebody
I've seen that.
with the video link, so, you know, you can find it easily. And so you may need to revoke that vote by the council if you're gonna be moving forward with different numbers now and a different mechanism
So we'll make a note of that and come
Yeah.
back to it in phase 2.
Yeah.
Okay. Claire, do you want to say something further about that, Jen? Okay. Claire?
I'm not an accountant. I don't know the legal things either. But in my lifetime, I've had one savings account for capital things saving for a new car, saving to pay off a mortgage, things like that. So it all went into one place, one account. But I always kept my own spreadsheet of how much I had towards a new car, how much I had already paid off on the mortgage, things like that, or how far I was to, replace a furnace. And I, for one, really want something like that kept very current for every meeting, so that if someone wants to know how much have we saved up for a new fire truck, somebody preferably all of you, will have access to the amount and say, this is what we had saved up for the fire truck, this is what we have saved up for the Vector, this is what we have saved up for a police car.
So I'll just say, Claire, that's actually, I think, more in line with the work that the Financial Reporting and Fiscal Practices Committee is going to bring to us in a few minutes. And it is absolutely on everyone's mind how we're going to create those mechanisms and those reporting functions. So stay tuned. I'm hearing you, and so is everybody else. And we're going to be addressing it, both tonight and over the next month or two. Okay? Any other questions, concerns, comments from community residents?
This is just on the budget.
Just on the budget. Yep, we haven't begun to talk about the rate setting yet. Okay, anything further from the members of the council? Hearing none, then I would entertain a motion to pass the budget as presented by the Water and Sewer Task Force, with the understanding that there is more work to be done on it over the coming months, but that it's as good as we can get it at the moment.
And designate phase 2.
In phase 2, right?
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Oh, second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further comment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? The motion passes. Thank you very much. Everybody take a deep breath. That's a big deal. And who wants to take on the first part of the second conversation around rate setting?
Do you just want to go through?
I want you to walk us through whatever it's going to take for this group to understand what we're doing here.
So,
Yeah, you want to start with the sheet and just walk us through that?
you want to start with that sheet, or do you want to go through the whole?
I think your recommendation,
The recommendation sheet first, or do you
do you have an
want?
idea about this?
No, not really.
Then yes.
Still.
Let's do the overall picture, and then if people want to go deeper into some of the
then-
rationale behind it, we can.
Right, because this will be a quick overview of the rates and.
Good, let's do that.
So, the proposal you received from our task force, page 1, I pretty much went over when I discussed the budget line items. You'll see our phase 1 recommendations for the water rates. I'm just gonna gloss over this because we'll get into more detail once we get on the backside of this proposal, but it's a 36% increase on water and a 27% increase on sewer that we're recommending. Further in the recommendations, recommendation number 3, we really need the task force going into what we're calling phase 2. We really need the council city officials to assign relevant staff to work with us to develop, whether it's building off Jennifer's spreadsheet or creating a new one, but develop a way that the city offices can calculate what is coming in for revenue based on projected rate increases, or so that it's not just a, here's what we want to spend, so that's what we're bringing in sort of scenario. Then recommendation number 4, and we feel really strongly about this, we have to find a way to get the rest of the meters done. We're 58% right now metered, but it is really making it hard. It's a lot of estimating to figure out what we're actually going to produce, what we're actually going to sell without meters. So whether it's, I mean, it's, you know, I don't know if the council will want the task force to work with Tom or if the council works with him direct, but how do we find the manpower to get that stuff in? 5 is, goes along with 3, but simplifying the water and sewer budget, putting all employee and staffing costs in one category, so it's easy to tell what is associated with a salary, what's associated with equipment or capital improvements. Having stuff sprinkled around really threw us for a little bit of a loop. Number 6, this goes back to the water meter thing, making sure that if it's a sewer system component or if it's a water system component, it's in the right budget, so that you're, especially with the auditors determining your system values, you know, what your system is actually worth, it's all there for them. Number 7 would be to, and this one can be kind of big. Number 7 is the council developing a way to either, or a policy, to either shut delinquent accounts off or go back to tax sales or something. But this city has some accounts that are 5 digits in the rear, and they're not letting us in to fix meters and to work on stuff. So there's money hanging out there. Now, you know, you could do after 90, you get shut off. You can get turned back on if you set up a payment schedule. You could, I guess the city used to do liens on properties for tax sales. Seems like a lot of attorney time, but it's an option. You really should start putting the full court press on, we feel, on those delinquent accounts.
I'll say one thing on this because it sounds really horrible, but once you go delinquent, you sort of, it's the same thing the city's finding itself in. Then you have this outstanding that you owe that's just getting bigger every single time you have a bill. So we feel we're being lenient in just not pressuring these people, but with some, to get them on some sort of payment plan. Otherwise, there's going to be no way anybody's going to see the light at the end of the tunnel. So it sounds really bad, and I don't think we'll be shutting people off, but to try to get people into a payment schedule to avoid getting, you know, more depressed about the outstanding bills.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's key.
Certainly to grab your attention.
Yeah.
And then number 8 is a preliminary list of the things that we feel we want to address in phase 2. Taking a harder look at the rate structure. I think you will see that when we go into the rates that our wording, it's still the same rate structure, but our wording, I think, makes it a little easier for the layman to understand. And then, again, this temporary stopgap, so trying to fine tune what the rate actually should be. The reviewing of individual line items, revenues, expenses, employee expenses across departments, the Village of Derby Center sewer contract, that needs to be looked at in detail, and we need to look at the calculations that are being used to assess them their fee. We had talked about looking at, not necessarily suggesting, but looking at the possibility of, instead of dividing employees up across budgets, do you just set up some sort of interdepartmental billing where, like water has $30,000 set aside to pay streets to dig something. Look, we wanted to look at the feasibility of that versus having employees 80% here, 20% here, 10% here, and then never really knowing what somebody's getting paid. And then one thing would be, when developing a budget, having a policy of documenting. So in other words, when we do have a manager again, department heads turning in worksheets to say, here's what is in each line item that could then be presented to the council. So instead of just 30,000 for this, here's what's in the 30,000. And that helps, you know, halfway through the year, if your revenue isn't quite where it should be, you can say, okay, we've got this in this line item, let's cut this out and we'll tackle it again next year. Developing a policy of not merging capital improvements and capital expenditures in the budget, equipment versus system, again. And then we really feel that the water sewer ordinance needs a strong look. So that's the start.
And so if I understand it correctly, Paul, what you all are recommending tonight is that we take action only on recommendations 1 and 2, correct? And the rest
Yeah,
are
unless-
recommendations for us to just take under advisement, and you'll be coming back to us with more information.
Unless you feel the last one needs action, which is the continuation of phase 2.
I don't think it does.
Okay.
I think it was included in your original mandate, that
Okay.
there would be,
Right.
the rest of this work, I think, would be included in that, so.
Okay. Yeah. So, and now you can jump in at any point. So,
Right, so
We-
how did we get to the rates, stuff,
Right.
right?
Okay. So we established the rate is basing it on the rate structure that we have. We went back and looked at really to a number of years. We took only the last 5 quarters and did a overall average on those. We had to do some adjustments for some errors that we did find, which created changes here and there. And threw in some estimates as to what we thought was just potentially the base rate, what was over the base rate, because of the way the structure was. We have the overall gallons, but then you have a fixed charge, which, how does that intertwine? Hopefully we did that right. I have second doubts on that, but I think we have rates that are close right now to what we can do. So we basically double-checked our figures, ran what we thought was an average quarter, and looked at what the budget was and tried to get a percentage increase that gave us the amount on the budget.
yeah.
And I ended up with the 36 and the 27. The 27 on sewer, everybody says sewer has been really, the expensive thing. It still is. The problem is what we did in establishing the 27 is that the last rate increase ended up skewing the difference between the metered rate and the non-metered. We went, I think it was 8%. And I don't remember the percentages because some of these are fixed on my sheet and the other ones I keep on running through. So I suddenly realized I have no idea what the totals are or what the percentages are. But it was 8% on the metered and 28% on the non-metered. And so we backed up all of the rates that had gotten sort of skewed, and mainly this was all in sewer. There was a little skewing that happened with rounding and various and sundry other things, and we tried doing corrections on that. And the most major is, so the non-metered sewer users are not going to see this full level of increase because they already saw part of it a quarter ago. I think just this last quarter is the first billing they have on that. So that's where that skew happened. And some of the figures, and I don't know if you sent out the detail that had the correction figures in it.
I did.
Yeah, that correction figure is to make up for that 28%, bring it back to an 8%, so everybody's on a level playing field and move forward.
So can I just pause there?
Yeah.
Because I know this is gonna be the million-dollar question. So I just wanna say as clearly as we possibly can exactly what happened. So a year ago, in May, there were new rates set. And those rates in November were unevenly added to by council. And so what we've done in order to address that is basically we've gone back to November and we've said we're starting from a point at which had we done an across-the-board increase in November on the May rates, that's the number with which we're beginning the increase now. So if you had the I believe it was 26% increase in sewer in that November time, basically we are not adding another 20 7% on top of that. We're going back to the 8% that everybody should have gotten and saying, now we're gonna add 27% to that.
Yeah.
Did I say that right?
That's correct, yes.
Hold on, Jennifer. Any other things you want to add before we start taking questions?
No, I think, hopefully, I feel I covered it.
Yeah,
Now
no,
somebody
I
has
mean,
to
that's,
interpret my English.
got it done. Yeah.
Patrick, are you okay? Anything you want to add?
No, I think that's the simplest way to describe it.
Okay, then I'm going to turn first to the members of council, starting with Kevin. Do you have any questions you want to ask? John, you've been a part of all these conversations. You want to have anything to say here?
I was just going to add one thing, which is that the state statutes and the ordinances are basically written on the premise that you determine the expenses required to operate the system and then work from that to determine a fee structure that will cover the expenses. And so the intent is that overall the systems are running on a break-even basis, but providing for reserves for future adjustments. Both the state statute and local ordinances allow for, the theory is that you're going to look at it annually, but the law actually allows you to adjust as often as every billing cycle. And so the overall premise is to try to balance out the two. And during the 7 odd years that there was never a rate increase, obviously expenses kept growing during that time. And so, you know, effectively there was a considerable period of time where we were going further and further in the hole due to no rate increases. When had rate increases taken place, there would have been a small percentage increase each year rather than the dramatic increase we're looking at now.
Thank you, John. Andrew?
Yeah, I know we're currently just looking at 1 and 2 hypothetically right now, but I do have a question. You said that there's 58% current meters. Do we know what the other 42% is as far as a number and what that will cost
So,
the city as far as?
not yet. I mean, Tom may, but the task force does not as of yet.
Do we happen to know what that, so we don't know what that number would be?
Well, the task force doesn't.
Tom, do you happen to know?
No, Tom.
So,
And do we have any meters ready to install at this
When
point?
we buy meters as we need them, as we install them.
Okay.
That's what that 25,000 was that they flipped back into from sewer to water. So there's whatever's left of that budget, that 50,000.
yeah.
Okay.
Carter?
I know we're just talking about 1 and 2, but the number 7 around the shutting off, and I'm just curious thinking about what that's gonna look like. How many accounts are behind? Is that just like a select number or is it more pervasive?
Unfortunately, we were stymied by the fact that the person who really knows how to manipulate the system was on vacation. We did not go there. Paul picked up on this and I saw a number that were sort of out of whack that clearly had been there for considerable time, considering what the interest is. I don't think you get, a couple of $100 worth of interest overnight. So there are some to work on. There's some that are just slightly behind.
Yeah.
And I think that projecting forward with the fact that we just ended up going through the latest rate increase, and those bills were coming in because there's a billing that's going out right now. So this is the billing that came out in February, the figures we're dealing with. That was only the first of sort of the rate increases. So it is
Right.
gonna potentially get worse as we go forward.
Okay.
But, the quantity, and I don't know, the NEMRC system's really good. You can pull a great deal of information from it. But then when I got finally to the office today to see Stacy, who really knows the most, I arrived 10 minutes before a doctor's appointment.
Yeah.
So we're sort of slightly stymied, and the clerk's office for the next 2 weeks is going to be technically short-staffed. We've got another one on vacation, and Jim might go across the street to serve on a jury, so.
Yeah, plus we got an election going on, so
Yeah.
we're under the gun then.
Yeah, so it's sort of one of those things, there's a lot of stuff that we did not get to do.
But stay tuned, because this will be a
Yeah.
big part of the deeper dive over the next 4 to 8 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, the piece I want to add to make sure everybody really is clear about what we're doing here is that the proposed rates that we've just reviewed with the task force will get us to within spitting distance, a little more or a little less, a balanced budget for fiscal year 25-26. In other words, we will not have deficit spending if we pass these rates. It does not in any way address the reality that there is also a long-term accumulated deficit that has been created. That's also a conversation for the finance team and the water and sewer teams to work on together over the next 4 to 6 weeks. We'll be coming back with more information about that as well. But for tonight, the priority was just to make sure that we stop the deficit spending year over year. And then we'll address the questions about the cash, the lack of a cash reserve, the dependence on the line of credit, all of that will come next.
And I think one thing I'll throw in, which is sort of the future or past, the new billing is just coming out. And when we review that, we might learn that we are literally not even close in covering. We're hoping we are, but we're dealing with figures that are just behind. Everything is just slightly behind. And so we have to see. So we're hoping that this is hopefully going to be the worst that we see, unless something is really, really bonkers, and it could be.
And just different take on the meters. One of the things, if we get the meters in, that can help us determine easy is if we're pumping more water out of the wells than we need to, if there's unforeseen system losses, stuff like that. That's why it's vitally important to fast track those if we can.
That is our best friend in this right now.
Right.
Yeah, and just one other point in terms of clarification as to how the rates are going to apply. The billing that's going to be coming out in the next couple of week or two for the quarter ending today is going to be based on the prior rates. These rates would be effective for the quarter beginning tomorrow. So May, June, July, the first billing that would reflect these rates is the billing that will be sent in August and due in September, because the billing is quarterly in arrears.
Yes. Claire, did you have a question? That answered it? Okay, are there other questions? Go ahead, Laura, you go first, please.
I appreciate all of this, and I appreciate Jennifer answering your question for me today, so I understood exactly what I was paying. And if it's okay, I'd just like to ask a question related to the water meters, which I recognize is for a little bit later, but from my seat on the financial group, what I've been told in some of the research that I've done is that we can't even look for funding to even do extra things unless we have all of our water meters in.
Right.
So that's just so that the council's recognized, that's really huge. And I have just given Rick some other information tonight that we'll look over later.
Bedtime reading, thank you.
Yeah, and I want to make a statement. I hope it's not going to sound horrible. It might be unpopular, but I'd be interested to know when we stopped putting in water meters, why it's taken so long, and as much as I really have, I've driven by the park and I've seen the beautiful structures and I know the kids are loving them, why haven't we been putting in water meters this winter? If we're spending time building playground structures, why aren't we putting in water meters?
Can I address part of that?
Please.
Number one, the water meters are put in by the water department.
Right.
The water department has not been participating in the play structures. That's one thing. I think that, depending on what's happening, yes, we do have a problem with installing meters. From what I gather, there are people who have been on a list, and we aren't sure the status of the list. This has come up in our discussions, but we had a deadline and just a certain length of time, but definitely something to get to. But because we have playground equipment does not, mean we've foregone meters. It's some other.
Yeah, I'll just say, Lori, I appreciate the curiosity behind the question, but I want to be careful not to pit one part of our budget or our activity against another, particularly in this instance where it wasn't even the same staff who were participating in those events. So.
I appreciate that. I don't know I just know that what I hear is we can put 3 water meters in a day, and I don't know the difference in the staff, so, if
Well, I want to keep us focused tonight
yes, thank you.
on
I
rates,
appreciate
right? We will be coming back to a conversation about what it's going to take to deal with the reality that we have 42% of our customers without water meters.
I do.
Go ahead, Paul.
I do have a spreadsheet, if you were interested, that breaks down every quarter the change in water meters, what's in and what's not. I could share that with you if you wanted to see it.
Technically, I have it too. It was part of our spreadsheet too.
Yeah.
It might have come off of that spreadsheet.
Yeah.
So we have it historically going all the way through, and
Yeah.
yes, there's been an extreme drop off in them. And, the ones that aren't metered are residential. I think we've got something like 50 that are potentially duplexes, and I think only 16 are industrial commercial considerations.
Okay, having said all of that, I really do want to, we are going to talk about meters endlessly over the next few months.
Yeah.
So I want to draw us back to the conversation at hand. And John, I assume you've got a question or a comment you'd like to make?
Well, I got a question. The 36% increase in the water rate, I assume that the amount you collect would be, at the year end of June 24, you collected $757,111. So is it fair to assume that 36% increase of that amount would be what you'd collect? Over $250,000.
I did it by quarters, John.
Well, I did it by the audited financial statement.
Yeah, I know. Unfortunately, I was delving into details, so I am really not sure what our, let me see if I have the original one. I think it was about potentially 200, I thought it was around $200,000 a quarter.
I did not print that and bring it.
No, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to find it because it's...
Well, let me just ask about the 36%. You're going to increase the current rate structure for water by 36%, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's pretty simple. You look at what you collected last year was $757,000. Unless the rents and charges are different from that, and the audited statement says $757,000. So it's a simple, I'd like to know, because I think the council is being encouraged, I think, just to bite off too big a chew in 1 year. And so that's just a personal opinion, but the real question was that 36% would increase to $757,111, but I would guess by 36% if you're increasing the rates by 36%.
Here's the problem with the calculation from my perspective, John, the way you're doing it. Without knowing anything about the numbers, because I'm not inside the spreadsheet. What that doesn't, that goes back to what the amount was at the end of the last fiscal year.
That's correct.
And we've had rate increases since then. And we're basing the current rate increase on the increase that took place in November. So I don't think it's a direct correlation between the numbers from last year and the numbers for next year.
It's even worse from my point of view.
Potentially,
well, it'd be worse because the 757 doesn't account for those rate increases that you had after the end of June, right? So anyway, I'm just pointing out that I think it's an awful big chew to increase it by that much. And you have $428,000 cash on hand at the end of June 24, and then it was increased by $30,000 that year. And you got to remember the expenses One, they don't look as good. It's cash flow is what really counts. What you're really looking at is cash flow. You got 300,000, I think, depreciation for the water fund, 400,000 for the sewer fund. That's not a cash expense. It's an expense, no argument. But all I'm trying to point out is that I think you don't need to take that big a chew to solve the problem. Yeah, it's going to take you 2 or 3 years to solve the problem. You've built that problem over 8 or 9 years, 7 years, whatever. I don't think you need to solve it in 1 year. That's the only point I'm trying to make.
Thanks.
And I think, John, what I would say to that is, I believe by mandate, we are supposed to collect enough income to cover expenditures.
Right.
So it sounds really good, but honestly, I don't think we could, you know.
So I want to be careful not to do it back and forth.
Yeah.
John, we've heard your point.
Yep, thank you.
Are there other questions, comments, concerns? Jennifer?
So I'm just looking for some clarification. My recollection is that we had a rate increase sometime, like, I want to say, maybe it was May, but I was thinking it was after that. I think it was like June or July. We had our first rate increase. And then in water and sewer, and then there was another one later that basically was a redo of the same one, as I recall. Is that an accurate recollection? I mean, I think they just did it again, was the...
So,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, they had a rate increase that was in May, taking effect in August, and one that ended up taking effect, I think this is our first billing at the new one.
Right.
The
That was passed.
February was the next one. Yes, so these are all almost,
Wasn't the one in the fall
Yeah.
just a redo of the one in the spring?
it was almost a redo with the exception of the fact that they ended up increasing the percentage on the non-metered sewer rates
Right.
in excess. So it was, whatever, it was either 7...
I think it was 8%.
8%, you know, one might have been 7%, whatever, they might have both been 8%. Funnily enough, I didn't pay attention to that, I just looked at what came in. So they were the same, but the only thing that really skewed it was the non-metered sewer.
Yeah.
And that went up 28%.
And
so
that's
the
what we
one-
backed out.
The one in May then, we'll use May, I don't remember
Yeah.
the month. That one didn't have that
It
in
didn't
it.
skew.
And so the one in May was an equal percentage for both metered and non-metered
Yeah.
people?
So what I did was I went back, as Rick said, to the May rates.
Okay,
I
that's-
did the increase that was November as if it was across the board, use those figures to go forward.
And that's great. I just, in my head, had it that the one that happened in May and the one that happened in November was basically like a replay. Do you know what I'm saying? Like it was happened in May and then it was a replay in November. I lost
90%.
the sight of this additional thing that took place.
For the unmetered sewer. Yeah.
Right, okay, all right, so that's question number one. Number two, depreciation. So I'm assuming that you guys are not including depreciation in your rates, is that correct?
Our budget doesn't have depreciation
Right.
in it.
Okay,
Our rates are based on the budget.
Right.
okay, so
Our
no
fixed costs.
depreciation,
Yeah.
fabulous. And then the last question, with the I know this is phase two, but I just am trying to confirm something. So with the historical deficit, if it is determined in phase two that the best way to handle that is to take out a loan to pay back the general fund, that becomes part of your operating expense. What I'm hearing from Mr. Manette is that we are able, basically every billing cycle, to come back and revisit and make adjustments as necessary. So if we did take that approach, what I'm hearing is that we could come back and include that additional expense into the, the overall expenses that are used as the fodder to create the rates and make any necessary adjustment. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. That's it. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments, or concerns? Ann?
I just put one proviso that I think is on that, which is if we take a long-term loan, you do need the voters to approve a long-term loan.
We'll talk about that in a few minutes. It's not part of this conversation.
Okay.
Joseph, did I see you gearing up to ask a question, or was that just me making that up?
No, no,
You're just in thrall.
my hand goes up before my brain starts.
Fair enough, Lori.
So this is about the water and sewer rates. So only because I've seen people asking this question, why are, how much are we going up since we haven't had an increase? So if we did 2 8% increases plus this one, technically after 8 years of no increases, we're going to go up 52% over the last year, moving forward in water, and 43, I think if I did my math right, in sewer. And I'm only asking that question because we did 8% the first time last year, which was, what'd you say, August? And then due in September, I guess, and then last September, and then 8% again in due now. And now we're going to increase it again. So I'm just, people have said, how much are we going up? How much are we going up? And and why wasn't there? So I'm just trying to get numbers in my head, that's all. So does that sound reasonable?
It sounds reasonable, but you forgot a rate increase that happened in May of '23.
Oh, there was a rate increase in May
Yes,
of
there was.
'23.
I started
Okay.
flowing those increases and then ran out of time. It was when I started flowing those that I realized between Sunday night and Monday night that we had an error. So I just pivoted on that and have not gotten back to it. Because to answer like your question, I used it to double check. Lori asked me a question which was, am I reading this right for what my rates would be? And so I just plugged what she said her use was, and she was spot on, So it's a great play sheet to have, but it's not ready for prime time yet.
Okay, there are no other questions from the residents. Just want to bring it back to the table and see if there is further deliberation, anything that anybody else wants to say here at the table about the proposed rate increases.
No, this is just teeing us up for our financial task force conversation. So thank you guys for stopping the bleeding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yes, with the best data that you have.
Yeah.
Truly, I think that's, you're just working with the timeline piece, the accounts, accounting. Oh my goodness, it's quite a lot. So we'll get more data, more.
John, did you want to add something?
My only comment, it doesn't address this directly, but I just wanted to thank Paul, Jennifer, and Patrick in particular for the hours and hours they've spent on all of this, and thank Jim and Stacy in the city clerk's office for the hours and hours they've spent on this.
And Robin.
Tom for all the support he's provided to us as well. Without all of that, we wouldn't be anywhere near where we are at this point.
Agreed. So, John, given your familiarity with the process, I wonder if you might bring us two separate motions. One first on the approval for the proposed water rates, and the second for the sewer rates. Sorry?
You need the third.
I was
the
gonna say
third?
the third, do we
Yeah.
have, but Tom stepped out of the room, I don't know if that's.
Oh, that's okay. The third is just because of the way that the rate increases were done before. The council voted a rate increase which was just the water department, then a rate increase that was the sewer and all of the hookup charges, the expenses for backhoe, etc. I have to admit, it was a decision that Paul and I made this morning, that there was a third vote, which is the service fee votes, because it doesn't really belong just in sewer, it does not belong in water. Before, we had water and sewer combined, so you have the water rates, you have the sewer rates, you had the extraneous rates. And then we separated water and sewer, and the service rates were combined with
All
sewer.
right, then here's what I'm gonna do. I'm
We
gonna
have that
ask
sheet for you.
one of you in the simplest possible way to give us a proposed language for the first motion, and we'll ask a council member to make it, unless, John, you've got it in your head.
Oh, he does.
So I'll make a motion that the water rates presented on this sheet that was in the council packet, which is labeled Water and Sewer Department Schedule of Fees and Rates enacted by the Water Commissioners on the 30th day of April 2025. Rates to be effective with the period beginning May 1, 2025, be approved.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. Any further comment?
Can I get a clarification on what's the different line from this one versus the one I've been looking at a while? So how is this one different?
She's asking how this is different from this.
I believe they are the same. They should be. We've gone over them because I used, because we did this. It is the same. The 36% increase on here is the same. Jim has a formatted thing for you to sign tonight. And I also, why I was late, was I was formatting it at home, sorry Jim, in case you guys had any changes you wanted to make, so we could make the changes. Rick could get it printed out because he's a miracle worker, and you guys could sign it tonight. But so if you want to make
Okay, I think that was clear, yes.
change on anything, but it is what's in your packet.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah,
where's the sewer one?
yeah.
We've got a motion on the table. Hold on to that conversation. I have a motion and a second. Any other clarifying questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Hearing none, the motion passes. Jim, do you have something we're all supposed to sign?
Yeah, I've got 3 of them, they're all supposed to sign.
Right,
Yeah.
because
And we'll just do all three motions and then we'll sign all three at the same time?
Okay, that's, so the service fee.
That's why we're doing it this way.
Okay.
Right, that's why we're spelling it out.
Yeah.
Mr. Manette, you want to give us a second motion, please?
So the second motion is to approve the sewer rates as presented as part of the document entitled Water and Sewer Department Schedule of Fees and Rates enacted by the Water Commissioners on the 30th day of April 2025, rates to be effective with the period beginning May 1, 2025.
And I will second that.
Okay, I have a motion and a second, and I'm hearing comments from the peanut gallery about a possible amendment.
Some of the versions of this sheet in the caption say beginning August 2025.
Yeah,
but the
those have
correction-
been corrected on what Jim has.
Yeah, these are also you made.
In the sewer section, we added septic fees of
Yes,
17
17.
cents per gallon. That was it was on the wrong end of the sheet and
Correct.
we
It was
missed
mixed in with the
Yeah.
equipment, and we didn't catch that
Yeah,
until
we deleted
this
the,
afternoon.
yeah, so that's the only thing with the
So
addition.
what exactly are we adding in here?
This,
From here
right
down.
here.
Okay, yeah, this would
Yes,
work
but where does
better,
it go
actually.
here?
It
This
is,
is the document
it's
we're
going,
looking for.
no, you're going on this part only.
Okay,
Jim,
so
could you
below, hold on,
circulate?
hold on. So below where it says vacant land with connection,
Then, yeah,
So-
Jim just handed me the.
You've got the correct version there?
official
Yeah.
one.
That's the
Underneath
second.
vacant
That's
land
the
with
third.
connection, the next entry is septic discharge fees of 17 cents a gallon.
One more.
Yes.
And then there are entries for sewer allocation and application fees, and reserve sewer capacity commitment fee, and final sewer allocation permit fees.
understood. Okay, so
Those are-
John, hearing that, I'm hearing you saying that that's the motion you intend to make, you intended to make, right?
Yes.
All right, and Andrew, can we call that a friendly amendment for your
Yes,
second?
absolutely.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second. Are there any other clarifications? Okay, hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion passes. Okay, now we have one more to move.
Okay, and looking at the official version here,
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
I move that the schedule of fees to be effective with the period beginning May 1, 2025, captioned labor and equipment fees be approved. And that strictly covers the service fees for labor and equipment. And
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any other comment or question? Love the sound of silence. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Hearing none, the motion passes.
Hand those down, John.
Yes, so if everybody would take a moment, and while we are signing them, do we all sign, Jim, or?
Yeah, there's a space for everybody.
Okay. All right.
We dismissed?
You are so not dismissed. Let me just say, I'm going to ask while we're doing this to just take a moment and appreciate the efforts of Carl King, Patrick Hurley, Paul Tice, Jennifer Hopkins, and John Manette over the last month and a half to make this happen. Thank you very much. And you're out of the hot seat. Leave your chairs because there's more to come.
All right. The only thing I'll say is we apologize that we just found things this morning.
We're good.
And if anybody wants to give me their email, or will you get this up tonight for people to see exactly what was done? You won't get it
I
up
doubt it will
tonight.
be up tonight.
If anybody wants to see the rates in between, we'll email them. Could you write in your email? Just so I make sure I have it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, and while we're doing that, I want to invite the members of the Financial Reporting and Fiscal Practices Task Force to come forward and join us at the table.
Thank you.
I noticed you tried to get the chairs far away from the teachers you could get it. Come on, Susie, you're next to me. Jim, let me know when you've got all the copies back in front of you there, please. Team shared this stuff. And I think we need to walk through it, but I can take the Great, so you got it.
Okay, Rick, no, you're good.
Okay, all right, so the next item on the agenda is item 4, section B, financial reporting and fiscal practices. There's a document that was submitted as part of the packet that I just got up this morning that we are not going to focus on unless specific questions come up about it. That was the review for the cash flow estimates. This is a very loose document. I just want to say it's been made public, but we're just beginning to play with cash flow estimates here. And so this is really just for the work of the task force and the council to kind of get a sense of where we're going. So we're not going to focus on that. I'm going to turn the conversation over to Carter, who chaired this committee, and let Carter and her team walk us through it.
Sure. Feel free to interrupt or add when I'm going through things. So very similar to the water and sewer task force, we got to work pretty much right away with the best numbers that we could. The goals were to strengthen our financial policies, but also kind of doing a deep dive and figure out where our deficit spending, just trying to get a good head on where we are headed. Also because we were facing a cash flow issue, pretty impending. We have a number of line of credits, some big infrastructure projects that we're teeing up to do. So it was kind of a perfect storm, but also a great reason to just meet Friday afternoons and dive into these numbers. So very also similar to water and sewer is we are needing to get better numbers and just having a better understanding of our accounting. And kind of speaking to what Claire brought up earlier, that's definitely a goal of ours. And what pretty quickly we led to, and to get into these recommendations, starts with NEMREC, which is our accounting software that downstairs uses pretty reliably. They've got their rhythm, but we have been using a trial balance, but pretty quickly we were learning we need more of a balance sheet. And I have learned the difference. They sound very similar, but there's a difference. And also just learning this process of, I've been in more nonprofit sectors, and this is municipal versus for-profit, so we have just been doing a lot of learning. But overall, we were trying to get a cash flow projection to try to understand where we would be, how much money we have saved away. Anticipating, again, these large projects like the causeway, the water tower, and how that impacts. So the first thing, do you want to add anything? That was like a big, okay, all right. First thing is to modernize and bring our technologies forward with cloud-based systems. So it would be an encrypted daily backup to NEMREC software system. This also provides us with, moving forward, we're going to talk about consulting services, but that will cut down on the travel time for our chip, are going to be our hopeful lead. So it will just modernize, help things go pretty quickly. And they also assured that it looks virtually the same as what is currently installed to hopefully make it easier transition, the easiest transition as it can be for our downstairs folks. I also should have mentioned that Jim was present for all of our meetings, as well as Robin and Stacy when they could, and that they're doing so much. And especially when I started to tune into what they have to do for the water sewer, I was like, oh my goodness. And then plus normal city business, I just don't want to skip over that anymore. So getting on the cloud, step one. Step two, doing it's called the Disaster Recovery Agreement Program. It is $500 a year, and it is basically, again, that backup going on the cloud, but also they have it encrypted and stored so that if something catastrophic were to happen to this building, if we all know how technology is, even if your backup hardware, some dust gets in the wrong place and it's kaput. So this is just that assurance piece that we have that. And so the third step would be to work with NEMREC, and really this is kind of gets in the nitty gritty of why we gathered, but it's basically a contract for bulk time agreement, and it's a discounted rate, and we have, after reviewing what our tasks are in front of us, Chip is like, oh yeah, we will burn through those 96 hours, and he also assured us that we can front load a lot of that work, so we can basically, once we get on the cloud, and we can start chipping away and looking through our accounting systems. Mostly has to go with the general ledger and how we are, some more details in here, but that is one thing, because we also talked about how when the trial balance comes across this table, it's just really thick, there's a lot to it, what can you infer from it, it's kind of limited. So again, rearranging things. And something I heard in the water and sewer presentation was, and that Chip picked up on right away, hopefully, no, I should stay focused. No, I'm just gonna finish this line. Okay, so he was able to basically look at a line and say, I don't think we have billed Derby for this water. So just right away, he was able to skim through accounts, try and understand where the town's at, and found an area where we could get some payback. So, I mean, that sounds bad, but you know what I'm saying. Okay, so the last one is we need to be prepared to warn a special election for short-term borrowing, because we do have a cash flow issue. As Rick said, with the best numbers that we have, you can kind of see where we're gonna get a little thin, and so we might need to have and warn a special meeting to help us with our cash flow. Also, this would stabilize our practices, borrowing mostly time, to help us navigate the rest.
I'm gonna stop there and do
Yeah,
those.
I was like, those are what we're really focusing on, but.
Okay, let's ask the rest of the, we're missing one person tonight who's traveling and unable to be with us, Hal Rodenberg. But we've got Travis Gaines and Lori Grimm and Susie Small here with us. And so let's just pause and ask if you all have anything specific you want to say about any of those 4 recommendations or the process, what brought us here together tonight.
Well, I'll just say that I was really excited to meet with Chip from NEMRIC last week. This system has been around for a really long time. It's used by, I think, Jim, most municipalities in the state.
90% of them.
Yeah, and it's obviously a trusted system, but a couple of things he said that I've heard from your meeting with them is that we really aren't using the full breadth of the system. And in a very short period of time, he literally was able to look at data and go, this and this and this, and wow. You know, and so for someone who understands the system, the background system, to be able to look at our numbers in the system and almost immediately say, you've got this, you know, you got this little money over here, you might be able to consolidate this, and you know, it was very refreshing. And you know, I know in my work, sometimes you're looking at the same thing over and over again, and then all of a sudden a fresh set of eyes comes in who knows just a little bit more about the background, and it can really just change everything, the way you're looking at things. So I'm pretty excited. I was excited to hear him say that there's, for the group downstairs, that there won't be any, you know, except for signing on, there won't be really any difference on what they're going to see once we get to the cloud. It just allows them to really dig in and help with our work. So I'm encouraging that. I think it's going to be a good step forward for us. There's other pieces and parts that we can get to once we do that. So I think it's going to be a great addition.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, Chip is the person who originally set up our accounting in 96.
1996.
Yes.
Which is basically the same chart of accounts with all that's been added onto it over the last 29 years.
And his resume stood out because he was in the past he's been a town manager and then a financial officer, and then he went back to this consulting role. So it was helpful to know that, you know, not only from his accounting perspective, but he understands how Vermont municipalities need to function healthily.
Questions or comments from the council about any of these 4 recommendations?
I can explain it, but do you guys want to explain cloud-based, going cloud-based versus what we currently are for the public that may not know?
I can take a stab, or do I want to pass the mic to Travis?
Go ahead, Travis.
So basically the application would live on a secured server that's operated by NEMRIC, and we would log in like you would a website through a secured connection and do the work online instead of having our own machines here with the software running locally. There is a fee associated with that. I apologize, it wasn't included in this. I think an initial one-time fee of
In addition to the fee, the licensing fee we already pay to use NEMRIC, there's a $750 fee to set up the transition to the cloud, and then it will be an ongoing fee of $20 per month per user. And I did a count yesterday with the department heads. It looks as if we'll be probably somewhere right around 11, maybe 12 users. 10 to 12. So it will mean an ongoing fee of $200 to $250 a month, roughly.
Yeah. And then just in regards to fees, again, it wasn't included in item 2, but there is a fee associated with that, around $500, I believe. And I'm hoping that this is laid out correctly, but if it's determined that we have a solid physical backup of the system, once we're cloud-based, it's essentially backed up. It's on their server. They're responsible for those backups. So we may not even need to
Yeah, the reason we've included it for this year is because that backup automatically means that NEMRIC can access everything from the last 2 years, all of the detail from the last 2 years.
So it's not-
So it assures that we actually have the ability to go back to, in addition to going forward.
Gotcha.
I want to say one other thing because I just want to voice out loud. One of the primary concerns coming from Stacy and Robin down in the treasurer and clerk's office is that there's been some history of unevenness with NEMRIC's cloud-based service. When they initially went online, the cloud, they were under the impression, they had been led to believe, I guess I would say, that up to 1,000 users could use this thing, or actually what they were told was an unlimited number of users could use the server simultaneously, and it's crashed the system, and they eventually determined that they needed a second and even a third server to distribute the use of it across the state appropriately. They're even now considering a fourth user, and there was as recently as this morning, ironically, there was a couple of hour glitch this morning where something happened to interrupt their system. I'm assured that that is not an everyday occurrence, that it's not common, but I appreciate the anxiety level that it raises, kind of going from our in-house system where we've got Dennis Beloin to help us pretty much with anything, to kind of losing some control over that. So I just want to name that that's real, and I will say that Dennis and I have spoken, and he's committed that he will work with the staff downstairs and support them in moments of crisis, should they occur, to try and do everything that's possible on our end to make sure that we can do the work. So, and he's been working this week with NEMRIC in anticipation of this vote, so that if you all vote tonight to go ahead with moving to the cloud, they're ready to begin working on this tomorrow.
I just want to say that there's a little angst downstairs about that anyway, and then this happened today, and that kind of escalated a little bit. But there are certain things we do downstairs that have deadlines that have to be met, particularly payroll and that type of thing. If we get shut down for a day, it'd be an extreme, a day or 4 or 5 hours, that puts a real glitch into what we got to do down there. So that's the only reason we're.
So I just want to speak to this because this is the way I work every day, and I work through a cloud-based system, and I mean my company has its own servers and those kind of things. However, the fact is, I remember locally, when the company I was with originally locally transitioned to a different IT provider, and we had big servers downstairs to one little computer. And it was a little heart palpitating for a little while, because we're like, wait, this doesn't feel good. But that will eventually go away, I believe. It's always, that angst is always gonna be there. But I believe that we've heard from them say to us, this is something they are doing all the time. And so I really am, I believe that their system is secure. They explained that to us. I think we're gonna be okay. It's gonna be a learning curve, but I think we're gonna be okay.
We're not worried about the security of it, it's the downtime that we may have.
Mm-hmm.
When you spend 30 years on one system and you switch to another one in a week, it's kind of.
Yeah, I understand.
Is there a way to mitigate the downtime risk? I'm thinking of the way my system works in my office. We switched from a server-based system with local backups with tapes that we have to run off premises every night to a cloud-based system. So we got rid of our server completely, but in terms of having a local backup as well, we have a little box, and I don't understand any of the technology, but it's called a network storage appliance, and it actually creates 3 local backups. It's like 3 or 6 terabytes of local storage in total. So with at least some of our programs, if the cloud is down, we still have the ability to work and function. And then local appliance is set up so that when the cloud comes back, it just uploads whatever was missed. You know, otherwise, the system is literally only 2 or 3 keystrokes behind us at any given time.
Good question.
It's a good question I was just gonna say it's a good question for Dennis.
And that local appliance device with all the hard drives in it wasn't very expensive, and the whole thing was less than $1,000.
Okay.
I know we had discussed keeping one computer as a sacred server for at least 6 months. I think we talked about.
Yeah, I don't know
How does
that
that
that's.
translate with the cloud though? I don't know.
Yeah, I think
So-
that, we're gonna have to let Dennis and the folks at NEMRIC
Yeah.
figure out the best way to move this forward.
And I haven't seen the contract with NEMRIC on the cloud-based transition, but there should be an uptime guarantee listed somewhere in the terms, so we'll know, what the possibilities are for downtime.
I'll ask about that, thank you. I see a number of hands, so let's go Jennifer, then Carl, then Ann.
Just a sort of technical question. I get to deal with Google Docs, which I find that you make a mistake, it suddenly is corrected and there's no way back. I'm just wondering what happens with cloud-based. Is there a way, if you've made a mistake, that somebody can't go in by mistake in one of the departments and wipe out something that belongs to another department? I mean, I don't know.
The functionality should be identical to the system that we're on now. I've even been told that the GUI looks pretty much the same. So what buttons they're clicking now,
Yeah.
it looks the same cloud-based.
Yeah.
And the functionality should be identical.
Well, I have that, I download from Google Docs, the spreadsheet, then I go and now correct the Google Docs because nobody wants umpteen Google Docs for the same thing, but because I just, I have a computer that jumps around and, you never know. So that would be sort of my concern, the downtime and can you wipe something out unintentionally?
I would make an assumption, this is a big assumption, because we haven't gotten to this point, but depending on the segregation of duties and security built into the system, there may be ways as things move forward that okay, you can only get into this and you can only get into that. But I don't know how the NEMRIC system is built, but I'm a big security person, and I really think that it is a conversation that we could have with them just to make sure.
What I understood from Chip is the permissions are very granular, so you can get very specific with who's allowed to do what or deny access.
It really shouldn't be any different than if it's hosted locally, because the permission structure would be exactly the same.
Carl?
Yeah, you raised a few concerns about how it operated and potentials of crashes and stuff. Have we explored other options, other companies that may be competitors that may have more successful models or lines?
Here's the short answer. NEMRIC is pretty much the only game in town in the state of Vermont. Well over 90% of the municipalities use it. Anything else, switching to anything else would be both a Herculean effort that we don't have the staff for right now in our own team, and potentially far more expensive than what we're currently doing. Ann?
I'm not opposed to going to the new system, but I what we call it and the things that are of concern, I would like to just get out there so that the council can recognize what their role is and what the role of NEMRIC is. In the, I think, and maybe it's an old version of the council meeting agenda, it says we were going to discuss and possibly vote on hiring NEMRIC as interim finance manager.
That's an old version, that's not.
That's an old version, okay. I would suggest this language only so that you keep in mind what they're good at and maybe what they're less good at. You don't want to not listen to them, but you want to take some of it with a grain of salt. So I would ask you to consider calling them a financial systems consultant, because they're there for you to get a better financial system going.
Actually, can I just interrupt for a second, Ann? You're right, this version didn't get changed. I didn't change it. I intended to use your language that you offered the other night. So if you all could make that change in
good idea.
B3, discussion and possible vote regarding hiring Nemrick as interim financial systems consultant.
And
Is what that language should be, okay?
And I want to say what disturbed me. I happened to see the gentleman talk, Paul, I think was his Chip. Chip talk and answer some questions and give some advice. And these are things that he said at the time, that basically he was interested in us borrowing from one fund to get us through some of these financial shortfalls momentarily, and then, pay it back. Remember to pay it back. And that's gotten us into trouble before. So that's financial advice as opposed to systems advice. And you may decide that that's a good idea, but I think you should really think deeply about that before you do it. And with respect to honing everything into as many accounts, I don't think we have that many bank accounts, but honing them into one bank account as opposed to having several dedicated funds in a certain separate bank account makes it a hell of a lot easier to make sure that money isn't coming out of there when it shouldn't. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't possibly consolidate. I'm saying you should seriously think about it. Why is it in a separate account? Is it better there so that you don't accidentally touch it when you shouldn't? I think he said also, oh, and the other thing that I'm concerned about, because he was in at the beginning of setting up the system, Paul pointed out that, Paul in Water and Sewerage pointed out that you figure out the expenses and automatically into the system came how much income you were going to bring in, which confused some of us for a long time into thinking that somebody had actually calculated that income. But if that automatically happened, did that happen because of the NEMRIC system?
No.
Okay.
It was a function of a budget spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. But I'm just sort of asking you to think that I want you to be the determiners of what happens financially with all the advice you can get from somebody who's knowledgeable in the system, but maybe from other people who are knowledgeable in finances as well. That this isn't, some people say, why hire somebody to do something and then try to do it yourself when you've just hired him to do something. And that's a good argument sometimes, but I just want you to be sure what you hired them for. Take all their advice on every subject, but the decision is yours, and you may want some other advice on the finances. Thank you.
Thank you. Joseph?
Yeah, I have two questions. One is probably stupid, which is still a pretty good ratio for me. Does NEMRIC, when you're talking about NEMRIC servers, do they have them in their office in Burlington, or are they paying for server space in someone, to someone like Amazon or Google, people who actually know how to run these things?
It's the latter, is my understanding.
Okay.
In fact, that's actually some of the challenge, right? That they thought they were contracting for something different than what they actually were.
Okay, so they aren't sitting around with boxes in their office with wires all over the place.
Little mice that scurry from box to box.
Yes. The second one is related to what Ann was asking. Is the idea of having this consultant that it is going to be someone who is going to work with you to make sure that the reports give you the information that you actually need, or is it someone who's going to advise you on, prudent financial management?
Anybody want to try that?
My understanding is that it's the former primarily. There's going to be some cleanup of our accounts in NIMRIC that, over since 1996, it's gotten a little messy. But all the work is going to be at our direction. And one of the main things is to get out of NIMRIC the numbers that we need to provide good financial documentation to the council to inform decision making.
And the idea that will help you know what the possibilities are, and then you decide what information you actually need.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
John and then Claire.
Yeah, in the audit report, it said that unrecorded activity and accurate balances were noted. That doesn't have much to do with software. I think the software that you're looking at is probably great, but what I just noted might have to do with your deficit in your general fund for last year was $884,568. Now, that's about 18%. I guess the council must have really dropped the ball, previous council, because wasn't anybody getting financial reports? The machine can do it. So I think you got a lot bigger problem. And of course, the auditor says that you've agreed to head staff turnover. You're going to update your policies and your staff. Basically, that's what the auditor says. You've agreed to do that, I guess, as a result of the audit. I just find it incredulous that you could have that kind of deficit in 1 year. I'll make one last point, and then
Welcome to my world.
Yeah, I'll make one last point and then shut up. When I was around, we were spending $5,000 to $10,000 to tax sales a year, or whatever else that came up. Last year, you spent $157,000 for legal services.
I'm sorry, for what? For legal services.
Legal services.
Yeah, so John, I don't want to go there tonight.
Okay.
It's not helpful.
All right.
You are welcome to enter back into the conversation when we get to that point.
I won't be here for that. But I just want to say that you have a big problem, and it's not. And having this new computer system is not going to solve it. Not going to solve it.
Believe me, we know.
So I think I'll just answer from someone who's new to this, to hearing all of this stuff. I mean, I come to all the council meetings, so I'm well aware. But I think the first thing we have to do is, it's not a new system. This is the same system the city's been using since 1996. There's nothing new. We're just putting it in a different place so that for storage, security, and getting some help going through our chart of accounts, looking at things that we may be missing. We have a great staff downstairs, but that doesn't mean that that all of a sudden, some account over here that's just not doing anything, it's just sitting there and it's falling off. The reports are not, we don't have a cash flow report, which may not be helpful. We haven't figured that out yet. The trial balances are volumes, correct? And so we aren't getting good reports, and we are well aware of the amount of deficit we have. This particular change will help us to move forward, and we are going to start addressing how we take care of those deficits. And that's where the short-term and long-term borrowing is going to have to come in to help with that.
Claire.
My career was as a computer systems analyst with financial systems. I don't know your system at all. We never worked with a municipality. But what I can say is that there was one particular company I worked for that worked with financial software that had a great reputation, was used by a lot of people. The thing is, the systems are very large, and many people work on them. And I'll try and make this point quickly, but in this particular system, the command that you use to run payroll, what you chose was run payroll report. Now, everything worked fine for a few years. Then there was change, and they brought someone in who wasn't familiar with the system. And so they decided, oh, well, too many people have to use this print of the payroll to check figures and assign stuff. And I can't wait for this person to finish. I need my own. So they ran payroll report, thinking they were making a copy. And what do you think it did? It paid everyone twice.
Live a happy week somewhere.
All right, now that's just an example of the wording not being indicative of what it is. And that you may have to, depending on, you know, just be very careful. And if you run into something like that, that's not like how you're used to phrasing things, make sure everybody knows. Post it everywhere.
Oh, everybody will know if it's out of the norm.
Okay, I'm gonna try and move us forward here, okay? So I see another question from Jennifer, and then we're gonna try and come back to council.
So the only thing that I'm seeing missing here is training. Is that part of the consulting? Yeah, is that what the focus of the consulting is?
Yes, it should be extremely minimal because there is no difference between the interface on an in-house server and the interface for the cloud. The only difference is how do you log in and how do you access the printer. Everything else is exactly the same.
Rick, if I can, I think we stipulated in our last meeting that training should be in the contract for the move to the cloud. It should be something that's included in what we're paying for there. It shouldn't actually come out of the 96 hours.
Correct.
Right?
That's right. It's not part of the separate
It's
agreement.
separate from the consulting.
So the training that would be, whatever training would be necessary is in part of the 750 to move to the cloud.
That's right.
I mean, one of the things that I know about myself too is that if you don't know what the system can do for you, then you're not using the system appropriately. And so I really think that some training probably is in order to just get everybody on board as to what the system can do for them. Because I suspect there's a lot of it that's being like unused that could make everyone's lives a lot, easier. And it's just because they don't know it's there. You know what I'm saying? They don't know how to access it. So that would be a concern I would have.
That has been part of our discussion, because obviously when they're doing their job every single day and they're doing the same things, maybe they have an hour to look for a different kind of report. We don't know that. So yes, that has definitely been part of our discussion. And NEMRC does have a website that has trainings. They're doing trainings that our staff can look at, and we can all look at. We're going to be looking to see if there's reports or certain things that maybe we're missing, so we are well aware that's a piece, because again, we've been using it since 1996, and there's always the opportunity that there's something in there that we're just not using.
Yeah. I think my final wrap-up thought or around this discussion around software, but we have this bigger issue, is getting our accounting in order. We should be having a conversation every council meeting about our deficit issue. We should be understanding our financials and actually addressing them and thinking about the next steps. And without the proper reporting, which we know NEMRC can do because all of Vermont pretty much is using it, can facilitate that for us. So we're hoping that it actually, at least my hope, is that it'll be a slightly nice lift for the folks downstairs, that they can you need a specific on this, here you go. I am not an accountant, I'm not a software developer, but there is a rhythm to it, and my hope with this, bringing it to the table to sign this contract, is to get a better understanding of our financials so that we can regularly discuss it with good numbers, because again, data, it starts there. We can't start to say, we're in a meeting for this amount of money to start address this, because we don't know where we're at, and the banks don't know where we're at either. So it's all about getting the right numbers in front of us. Yeah. Is that okay then?
So there were reports, maybe different than the NEMRC reports, budget to actuals and things of that nature that were available under the old system that, used to be included on, I don't know if it was every council meeting or every quarter or whatever, but they suddenly disappeared and no longer were available, no longer being presented to the council. So while this system may produce, the Cadillac version of all these reports, if they're intentionally withheld from the council and intentionally withheld from the public, then you're gonna have issues. So, I'm okay with what's happening here at the table these days, but you gotta walk the talk.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Brings us down to our other additional recommendations, I think.
Can I just, Jennifer, if you have something that you haven't seen in a while, feel free to hand it to us. Because again, this is not a new system. We are gonna be using the exact same system we've been using. We're just getting some assistance to move us into the 21st century with what we've had. And so if you've got something in your records that is something that the council was
given.
given.
This is a conversation that Mayor Chase would prefer us to have outside of this meeting.
Well, that's fine.
Indeed.
But all you need to do is go back and look at historical agendas.
Yeah, so I'm gonna rein us in, because here's the bottom line. The reason we are going to the cloud
Yeah.
is because we are contracting with NEMRIC to help us to rethink and modernize a 30-year-old accounting system so that it is as easy to understand as possible and as well laid out as possible, and it creates the reports that we want that will be understandable by our council and by community residents on a regular basis. That's the point of the exercise. And we'll get to what those reports should look like a few months down the road. Okay? So before we go to having Carter walk us through these 4 individual motions, which I think is the best way to do this, I want to offer, we've had one suggestion from Ann that I should have caught earlier for number 3, which would be that the motion would be to engage NEMRIC for interim financial systems consulting, right? Instead of the way I originally wrote it. You got that, Carter?
I see it as correct as number 3. Where would you see it?
I'm saying engage NEMRIC for interim financial systems consulting.
Okay.
Okay, not consulting services, the way I wrote it.
Yeah, okay.
And I think Ann's language is helpful and clarifying.
Yeah.
And then there's a similar thing, which I should have caught earlier, which is in number 4. It should not say be prepared to warn a special election for short-term borrowing. It should say be prepared to warn a special election for long-term borrowing.
Yeah.
Because that's actually the place where we need permission from the voters.
Yes, and it isn't correct in the paragraph, but yes. we
Yes,
should-
but
yeah,
we're
the
gonna be doing
motion,
just the short version
the
motions here,
motion,
not the
yeah.
whole paragraph.
Yeah,
Right.
definitely.
So Carter, if you would walk us through 4 separate motions for the council, please.
Alright. Can I have a motion to engage New England Municipal?
You can make it.
Oh, I can, that's true. Okay.
Have at it.
I entertain a motion.
No,
Nope.
moving it.
I'm moving the freaking motion. Engage NEMRIC for cloud migration services.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further comment? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Motion passes. Thank you, Carter.
All right, I'm going to make a motion to authorize Mayor Alfred Chase to engage NEMRIC for off-site data backup.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further comment? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Motion passes.
Can I look at your sheet? Thank you. That says financial consultant? No.
Financial services consultant.
Okay. I would like to make a motion to engage NEMRIC for interim financial services consulting.
No, sorry,
wait.
financial systems consulting.
Systems consulting, thank you. Okay, I'll read that one more time. I make a motion to engage NEMRIC for interim financial systems consulting.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further comment? Hearing none. Oh,
Yeah, I want to comment before the next motion.
all those in favor, hearing no further comment from the council, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. Jennifer, what would you like to add?
My question would be, why are you saying each long-term financing, why are you not saying borrowing as appropriate, either long or short-term?
because the only reason we would need to go to the voters is for long-term financing.
And the distinction is basically less than a year versus more than a year.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's right. John?
I have a quick question on that. Don't you need to get voters to approve the over expenditure for last year? I think you do.
I don't know, but it's a question for another day.
Okay.
But
Okay.
it's one that I hope the Finance Committee will note, because I'm not sure I would keep that before me, so thank you, John. Joseph?
Yeah, if you move to be prepared to do something, what does that even mean? It's a recommendation, but I don't think you're actually calling for specific action.
I hear you, but I see no harm in it. I think it's not a bad thing, given our history, for the council to take action preparing themselves and the community for what may be coming. If you're so moved, make a motion.
Yeah, I'm gonna make a motion to be prepared to warn a special elections for long-term borrowing.
I'll second that motion.
I have a motion and a second. Any further comment or question? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. Okay, everybody just take a deep breath there for a moment. And we have 3 further items that are really just for information at this point. They're not items we're trying to take action on tonight. They're just things that the task force has brought to the council so that we can be aware of them, of the fact they're coming.
Andrew, reminded me that this one needs your signature based on that first one.
Yes, I will sign this, Jim, the bulk time purchase agreement. I will sign it and make a scan of it tonight so that I can send it to Nemrick tomorrow, and I'll give you the copy as soon as I scan it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
So the other few tidbits that we discussed that we need to address, so consolidate and streamline municipal accounts. There are some things that have zeros in them, there are some things that have zeros in them, but they should have funds. So just looking and cleaning up. I used the word concise and I got corrected. It's not concise, it's just, again, more of that cleaning out of our accounts. So, yes. The other second thing would be we need to start thinking conservatively about our borrowing practices instead of turning around to the bank if there's any way to look internally. And there's a number of ways we can do that, but just that would be our recommendation when there is a possibility. Again, I don't want to name anything or put any false preconceived notions out there because we don't have a really good accounting record yet to look at. And then the last one is continuing to be financially transparent and relay this information with the public. Speaking to our history, that a lot of the corrections that we are now taking originated from Publix. And I just am gonna leave it at that. So again, continuing on a path forward where folks feel like they are included in the conversation, we can communicate clearly what's going on, and so that way these conversations don't come out of nowhere, because that's we're a public we're a public government. We should have that established. So those are just things moving forward. I don't think they take a motion, and we'll be able to, again, once we have those records, speak more to them. But anything I'm missing?
Anything from you all? Anything to add? Council members, do you have any questions or comments about any of those recommendations that we will not take action on tonight? They're just for our consideration.
Thanks for all the hard work. I mean, this gives us hope.
Indeed. Members of the community, anything that you all want to add? Jennifer?
So I commend everybody in the hard work in cleaning up this mess that you've all inherited. And I just would ask that when we're going through the budgetary process in the fall, we've got to put on some glasses of some really conservative stuff. Because I really think that the culprit here is expenses. And taxes right now in Newport, you know, they're really high. And our water and sewer rates now are going to be up, you know, 1,200 plus, you know, if you're not metered. And we're going to be forcing people out of the city. It's getting to that level. And I've heard talk from, various people that I've, bumped into and stuff about looking for real estate now outside of Newport. And, we've stopping the hemorrhaging of the deficits, and I agree, and it's what's needed, and we got to do it. But in the fall, we've got to tighten our bootstraps, and we have to really cut back and look for ways that we can do that. And I think all the department heads need to be thinking, in the future about that. Where can cuts be made, and how can we just, tighten our belts here for a bit? That's my only commentary.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay, I don't think there's any further action necessary, right? So I'll just pause here to say, again, a word of huge gratitude. I'll ask the community to join me in thanking Susie Small, Lori Grimm, Hal Roddenberg, Travis Gaines, and Carter Finnegan for their hard work. Okay, that's it. Y'all can leave the hot seats. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joseph, good seeing you.
Do we have any comments, any members of the public, members of the community who have signed up to speak?
I've made enough comments.
Okay, there's no one signed up. I see you, Jennifer. You signed up. And Jennifer, I see you saying you would like to speak.
Yeah, I didn't know.
Can you please keep it brief?
You're gonna be around, right?
Go ahead. John, can you please step aside?
Sorry.
It's all right. Jennifer, if you'd like to come forward and speak to the council, you're welcome to do so.
It's just, there was a comment that was here, it might have been clear, that reminded me that last year, I think it was last year, Becky, who was interim, whatever, city manager at the time, did get a great deal of trouble for saying in May that potentially department heads watch your budget. And I just thought, is that something we should say again this year? Because, stakes are about the same. It was not a halt, but I can't, somebody should be able to remember the meeting.
So I'll just assure you that I've met individually and collectively with every department head. Everyone is well aware of the cash flow challenge and is doing their level best to keep expenses down.
Which I think, but sometimes, putting it out in the public, particularly following up.
I'm not prepared to recommend the council do that because
No, but I think, I wasn't suggesting, I was suggesting that maybe it come up for discussion, and you have answered that they've basically been.
Everybody is paying attention.
Yeah.
I guarantee you.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Any other comment? Okay. Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to set the next meeting of the Newport City Council as a regular council meeting scheduled for this coming Monday, May 5th, 2025 at 6 p.m. Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
I have a motion from the president. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Touchette. Any comment? Hearing none, all those in favor please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Hearing none, the motion passes. Who wants to move to adjourn?
I will.
All right, here we go.
It's 8:07.
Close enough.
Yeah, honest.
We have a motion to adjourn at 8:07. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much for a great evening, everyone.